Hello and welcome to this exploratory audio adventure. I'm not even sure what this is going to involve or evolve into. Welcome. Thank you so much for clicking and joining me and listening. And my name is Allie with AmarieSpeaks. And this is my attempt at a personal Bible study. Dare I say it? I'm going to call it that, I guess, for now. I think I'm going to have some kind of preliminary tagline to go along with this Bible study series. To really angle it from an appropriate forefront that everyone and anyone from any walk of life who happens across this will understand right away if it's for them or not. Because this is not going to be a traditional thing. I have no traditional knowledge, background, exposure, or understanding. I actually grew up completely kind of away from traditional religious routines. Some of my friends had them. My grandmother was very much into it, but my father was not. I grew up in a household with my grandmother, in her house, with my dad and my sisters, 2 sisters, and I'm the middle child. So yeah. Read into that as much as you'd like if you're new here. If you're not new, you know all about that already, probably. You certainly know that I don't have a religious background or a super strict point of view on anything. I like to keep an open mind, and open eyes and heart, and just learn. And then find what's right and true for me. And that's what I'm doing here with my Bible study. That's why I'm choosing to read. I'm reading this New Testament. I am literally reading a pocket version of the Gideon's International. I don't know what that even means. I have not looked into it, but I will. I found this. And yeah, I do things that come to me, come into my world and are presented to me. By God's source, by spirit, universe, my higher self. All of these different terms I use, and interchangeably so. Like I said, I like to keep an open mind. So if that kind of thing triggers you, or you don't vibe with it, or you were hoping this was going to be something else, and I hope you stay and can listen to another point of view. But if you can't, that's cool too. Peace out into your highest good. I hope you're off to ride into the sunset. Be free to do as you please. Please spend your time doing things that you enjoy. That's what we should be doing right now. Things that make us feel good, uplift us, that we feel honorable service behind. Doing great projects or commitments, spending our time wisely as we enjoy it. Not scrolling or slaving, not, just mindlessly passing the hours in some form that's habitual and mundane. I want to live my life alive. And that's what I'm hoping to do, and that's what I'm creating here. And that's hopefully what this little area will become. And that's how I'm choosing to interpret this reading of this spiritual text. I'm not coming at it from a position of any sort of stigmas or any sort of strong beliefs. I just want to put that out there in the forefront. Also, another thing I'd like to put out in the forefront, there's going to be a lot of questioning. That's just the way I learn and like to do things. I like to understand about something. I enjoy seeing things from multiple angles. I need kind of to see something in order to learn it from many different perspectives. I like to have a full range And also, like I said, I don't have sort of a good background standing foundation. So some of the things that I bring up in question, they might be so obvious or so out of the realm of others, or some who've already read the Bible or who have a good knowledge. You know, I would love input. I love personal opinions or other resources, references that people have who teach other studies or teach language or teach the history behind it. I watched a little bit on Aaron Abke. I really appreciate the way that he is looking into and talking about Christianity, Catholicism, history, all of it, and even other spiritual texts, metaphysical texts. I found him through the Law of One, which is the text that I find significantly resonant to my personal perspective and my understanding, my capacity for language and understanding, directionality, where I feel my sort of mindset resonates the most with on a frequency and density. It has a knowledge base in that sort of realm. And most beautifully, now I'm having and seeing that that is an echo of all other spaces and creations and traditions and cultures. And so here I am looking at the Bible again. Again, I say, I'm thinking of when I read the Old Testament in college, and what a trip that was. I'm going to do a whole talk and angle on that as well at some point. But here I just kind of want to give a little introduction and sort of air out what I am doing and will be attempting to do. I've already sort of started reading a little and have some notes going. I'm going to do a bit of backtracking, and then I might do some live reading. I'm not quite positive. We'll see what and where it takes me through the project. But I feel like this is a really exciting, exploratory kind of thing to do. And it will be unique to me because, I have quite a unique standpoint, and I'm going to be, and I already have been, sort of referencing different metaphysical and esoteric kind of teachings, reference points, other new, I hate to even use the phrase New Age because it has become, kind of triggering and hijacked in the mainstream and totally misinterpreted, I think. I did an entire series, Comprehending Consciousness, talking about these kind of basic terms that have done that. They have done that too. And New Age, totally one of those. And I get it because, there's a inversion. And the shadow and that negative alignment, it doesn't care what mask it wears. In fact, it wants to wear as many as possible because it likes to create confusion. It likes to defile positivity, truth, rightness, correctness, anything that is unique, specific sort of variety of the hues available, it wants to exploit. That is the negative alignments, calling and purpose. So, of course, there's sort of a double-edged sword, and there is a real truth of happening. There is a bad sort of new agey kind of thing. But we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And there's a whole truth there. And there's real workings for us if we choose to use them. But so far, so much as we keep being easily wrangled into the tricks. And that's another thing that I really hope to get into, and the reasons I'm reading the Bible here. And the real whole thing behind the seeking of truth, and my truth, of course, is wanting to know and understand myself, my truth, the truth of here much more clearly. And to understand, okay, is this truly a quote-unquote war, a spiritual battle over mankind? Is this really sort of an angels and demons, God versus devil? Is this a righteousness versus evil doer kind of thing? And I have been around the circle many times, and from many different angles. And like I said at the start, I'm lucky enough that I really wasn't pushed into any sort of mindset rigorously as a child. I was exposed to many different varieties of the mindset, in fact, because another little personal tidbit here for people who aren't familiar with my channel, or maybe, missed the specific episodes I've talked about my own personal backgrounds herein, but growing up, like I said, was exposed to many varieties on the spectrum because my family, my grandmother was my father's mother I'm speaking on. Her family consisted of a traditional family that was a Catholic, traditional kind of American family. My grandparents were Depression era, born at the late 20s, and lived through the war era, and their children were born through the 50s, late 40s, early 50s, late 50s kind of. They have 4 children, and they all went to St. Mary's Catholic schooling, and they all went to church, and they were, my son, oh my goodness, I'm channeling my grandmother right now. My father was an altar boy, so were his brothers, and my aunt was also involved in the church. I'm not sure what they call girls. I don't even know what they call the girls. This is how crazy. This is how excommunicated my father is from from the church. Like, he totally was. He got exactly excommunicated. He ended up, becoming whatever they call one of those. I forget what they even call them now because it's been so long since I've listened to my dad tell these tales. They have certain verbiage that goes along with the tradition and the culture, and I forget. If I get into telling the story, I probably remember it. but yeah, so he was a black sheep in the family. His older brother, my dad's sort of a middle child too. They had an older brother, a son, then my father, and then the baby, right? I mean, now I'm getting excited. I'm going to screw up. They had the oldest son, a daughter, then my father, and then the youngest son. So my father's the middle son, kind of, right? Classic rebel, classic sort of rebelling story happened with my dad as well, because my dad missed sort of the Vietnam age. He went, tried to go that route, but couldn't really go into the military. He tried to do it, but couldn't really fit in too much. He ended up going the hippie route, which started when he had come back through the 60s and 70s and got caught all into that. And hitchhiked through across America, ended up over in Haight-Ashbury and all that, and on the West Coast, and then in Northern California for quite a while, living up in the mountains and the trees, and living kind of a hippie, culty life over there for a little while, growing weed and hippie. Cult, I don't mean religious, really cult. He wasn't involved in too much religious stuff. Off and on. This is the interesting thing with my dad, because my father is a spiritual seeker too, a truth seeker. He's an 11 too, life path, and he's not a fully committed 11. He doesn't have it in all pathways, but there's a calling of spirituality with him, but he can't really seem to get his footing right anywhere. But while he was out there, what am I going? I can't believe I'm like into a whole skit here about my dad. So strange. But when we talk about religion, I think it can be so personal and so family involved, right? It is. It kind of comes from these deeper rooted ancestral ties, where we grew up, our home. It's so personal to us, right? A lot of it is included in our very start of where we came from. So interesting. But anyways, he bounced around through that kind of stuff, but was very much out of it. He got excommunicated. He was, seen as, whatever. He was a big questioner, too. My dad liked to ask too many questions. He never really fit in. And when he came back home here to the East Coast and ended up having us as children and, being caught up in the lifestyles that him and my mother were, they, of course, resorted to staying with my grandmother because she had a wonderful house and a whole situation, plenty of space. Other children had obviously gone off. It's so funny because they all were sort of involved in the church and missionaries. His youngest brother, he went off to all over the world, down to Mexico and to Africa and over to Europe, all over the place, as a missionary. And my aunt, his sister, was a nurse, but then she also became a missionary, and she's been all over the place. Her and her husband ran churches. They were always, they were in a bunch of different places in my younger years, and we used to visit them sometimes at their churches. I don't even know what sort of branch they were involved in, but maybe it was like a Pentecostal or a very much like speaking in tongues and flailing and very deeply involved in that. I wasn't really exposed to it. My dad really didn't like it. And my dad made fun of it a lot, so I only went there a couple of times. My older sister is the one who ended up there a little bit more, and my dad was really mad about, actually, when he found out that they were doing things and that she had been baptized and stuff behind his back. Oh my God. We never went back again after that. But I forget how, even like she might have been 11, 10, and I was probably 6, or 7. But yeah, I don't know what branch they were, so forgive me for these kind of things. I don't know the names of them either. Like my dad made it a point to make sure that we were not exposed to that kind of stuff. And I was kind of on his side too. I kind of see it as fanatical and nonsense. No offense. I mean no offense to anybody, or, at all when I say that. And again, through the series, if I say things that could be deemed offensive, I don't mean them to be. I'm just such an outsider that I don't have the etiquette. That's the word, right? I'm like the Little Mermaid at the tea party or at the dinner party or whatever, combing her hair with a fork. I just really don't know what is proper and what isn't. So please, laugh with me, at me, whatever makes you feel better. But I really am here to learn and understand and question and find truth. I want to find the best solution for all. I don't want to be jammed into perspectives of others that's uncomfortable to me. So I hope, I would never want to do that to another either. I want to encourage everybody. If you feel like you don't want to eat with that dinner fork, you like to eat with the bigger one, or you don't care about what size knife or whatever you want to slurp your spaghetti, go right ahead. I feel like we should all be doing what feels good to us and poking at the things that are incorrect to us. Not in a mean way, but in a way to help them stand stronger, to help them look back at us and provide clear answers so that we can feel stronger about those truths they say that they're providing. That's why we should be able to ask, because it should be strengthening. And that's what I feel: truth, God, real, actual knowledge, real, committed, solid values, worth, and information and wisdom is built on. And that's what's within the real Bible, within all sacred, metaphysical, spiritual, traditional texts. There's truth in all of there. ingrained in there because the negative inversion, they can't erase it. No matter what they want to do. It's too bad because it's truth. Everything speaks the same echo. It's a parallel of a parabel. Right? Parables, parable parallels. You can't even say it. It's a tongue twister. But it's all the same lesson. It's all one truth. And so it doesn't matter the characters. It doesn't matter the timelines, the scenes, or the scenery even. It's all the same. And that's a huge message that I've been receiving on my own. And I've been talking a little bit about that in the Jesus Journal podcast sort of entry, so I'm not going to get too caught up into that. But I bring that up, to just say that there, if there is, and whether there is or isn't, a true sort of war happening here on Earth for humanity, for consciousness, for free will, even. And now my throat is getting really dry and itchy, so I know, I'm hitting through points. Forgive me for drinking on this. But if it is, it makes sense that we prepare ourselves and that we are ready and that we know how to look at truth for what it is. And that we look for the truth and that we let go of those things that are distorted. Or at least, seek a way through them in the most comfortable way for everyone. And that's really what I'm hoping to kind of do, and what I am seeking through reading this text, and by having questions, and by seeking different commonalities and differences, to learn through it. So I wanted this to just be a little bit of an introduction, and I'm not going to do any direct reading yet here in this first episode. But what I wanted to kind of just look at and talk about was, my personal standing, where I'm coming up to this, the fact that I don't really have a traditional viewpoint, and that the fact that I actually am kind of coming at it from a angled, very different versions of exposure, and none of them too rigorous. None of them, are too familiar to me to the point where I feel like I'm included in any of them. I really feel very much so like an outsider in all aspects. And so I feel like that gives me, and it always has given me, a different view on things in my whole life, my walk of life. And growing up and having random experiences to exposures, and then having also my grandmother there as more of, she was such a living embodiment of true Christianity, of a real saint, in my personal opinion, and in what others have ever said about her. She, was always a very saintly person. And, I had kind of started roundabout and forgot to even mention, that my family was Catholic, my grandmother's family was Catholic and all of that. But when the Christian revival hit, in those years, 60s, 70s, my family, my uncles and aunts got really caught up in that. And my dad even got caught up in that a little bit. But then he ended up getting kicked out, or ended up being a backslider and all this kind of stuff. And he turned into a black sheep, and they all kind of really looked down on him, and he turned it in, and they pushed him into exile. And he was very bitter about that. And so we kind of got raised in the shadow of that. And then I was able to see his real resentments. And he was able to bring forth and poke at a lot of things that just did not make sense about the things that they did and said and read, and things my grandmother would say too, but my grandmother was such a patient, calm, quiet person, not a yell, would never yell. She had like a whisper yell once in a while that you would really, if she was super upset, like you might get out of her. But she never swore. She never drank or anything like that. You know what I mean? She was a real kind of Puritan-esque type of. She would call herself a Christian after that, after her awakening experiences and later in her life, and when I ever knew her, you know, because I obviously didn't even know her before then. She was a very devout Christian, but, you know, yeah. It's nice to have the teachings from her, to see the word in action through her deeds, to see her really offer free service, no strings attached, always helping others. She was always part of the community, Bible studies and all that kind of stuff. She drive all her little old lady friends to them and line dancing and all these things, different nights of the week. She went out to do different things in the community. She was always really fit. She was, this is my lifetime, of course. She's older, you know, she's my grandmother by these times. But she was always the more healthy one. She drove the latest, and she'd drive all her old lady friends around. My grandfather passed on in 1992, which was when I was very small. And this is why we end up my dad's reasoning is why he ended up staying and living with my grandmother. My grandfather passed away, and she needed the support. And she loved having the grandchildren there, and she loved helping us. And my mother ran away. My mother could not stand the light. As so many of us who live in shadow and hate ourselves can't. And my mother is really the sort of complete opposite version of the mother. She said very much a bad mother in the classic definitions of what a mother should be. And so she just couldn't bear it whatsoever. And she couldn't bear herself, and she couldn't bear reality, and chose drugs and all these other kind of things throughout most of my life. But I had my grandmother, obviously. It's so interesting to see the different shades of variety, too, over the years, of different types of choices we make, and why. And what we use as excuses, or what we use as a shield, crutches and all these kind of things, you know. And again, religion helps us through these things. Having faith helps us through these things. And which ways, that chooses up to you, because when you look at the words and these things in the Bible, there's so many different angles you could choose to filter them through, interpret them as, and make conjectures based upon. So it's going to be very interesting to go through this and look at. Yeah, I think I have gone a bit around what I wanted to talk about, but I am coming up here in a half an hour, so I think I want to leave these a little shorter than longer. I think what I'm going to leave off here with is just a little bit of my first notes here of questioning questions from the start. And not that I'm trying to provide answers either, but it's interesting because some of these things I wrote maybe 2 months ago or so. I've been, what is it? June, July, August. Yeah, into 3 months now. About through June, I have started reading this and doing some questions and writing highlights and questions about these things and highlighting terms and drawing connections to things. So that's what I'm hoping to sort of start back with now in this series, is going over that and then keeping going with where I'm at. But as I said before, I'm reading this little pocket New Testament, Gideon's version, and I'm starting with the book of Matthew. Major things that I'm going to be talking about are terms, things like the Father, and drawing connections to what the Father really could be, even, and not saying, I'm not trying to take away from the vision or the idea or the concept that of a great Father and the divine masculine energy, the Father as a logos, as the great idea, but I also want to talk about the other bigger connections or different words that we use for the Father, right? Like the Creator or the great architect or the logos, also things like truth, light, unobstructed light, your connective lineage, your heritage, your power, DNA, all these different things that come along with the term of the Father. And that when we're looking at these words and Jesus' teachings, what he could really be terming about the Father. And other things that I've sort of just come across here at the start, that have me questioning, and also, I want to seek more around the term suffering, what they're really talking about, especially when it's interesting because they use that term a lot, and the suffering obviously ties into the Buddha teachings and other realms of life, and and like I talked about, sort of with the comprehending consciousness, this is more way past beginners. This is more deconstructing distortions, which I'm getting into now, the adepts layering. But suffer, when we think of it, we initially get into this whole bad realm of things about suffering, getting out of it, learning how to suffer, But there's way more to suffering than actually even has to do with the negative side of it. There's positive to it. There's a whole coin to it. And to the term, and there's also other similes that we could pull from suffering. There's other translations and interpretations from that word of suffer, to bear, right? And that could possibly be more meaningful or direct to what they actually meant in their context. And as we're talking about context and times and meanings and actual what we were talking about, what is the isness here, I'm going to air out I've talked about this in the Jesus Journals a bit, and I'm going to air it here even more. And I'll talk about it a bit more in a designated episode, probably potentially before I even start the direct readings. I'm not sure. But it is a question about the verbiage and the peoples and stuff. And I'm just wondering, about the distinctions amongst peoples here in these many verses, and what the quote of people today might interpret. So people as in the Christians, Catholics, us white people, hate to kind of get into this here. Americans, me, myself, I'm speaking to likeness of myself right now. And I'm speaking as an outsider, so I am kind of I'm not looking for justifications or excuses, but I'm just wondering, what's your tidbit? What's your perspective on this? Is this some of the crumbs you brush under the rug and we just don't talk about? It's the elephant in the room, and then, can we please, let's stop doing that. This is a huge issue. If it is an elephant in the room, we're in the wrong room completely. And in fact, we are enslaving ourselves by stepping into this room, so we'd better address the elephant and figure out what's the case here. And then get out of completeness of this trap, if this is what it is. I'll say quickly, and I'll link a channel, A Static in the Attic, I really like. Many others who are talking about this. But recently I watched a great video on him, and I'll link the video talking about along the lines of these things. Because us as truth seekers, and who's to say who Jesus really was, and if it is an inverted archetype, if it's a carrot on a string put out there to trap us or not. Regardless of that, let's not take away from the truth. There's true teachings, metaphysical realness of what Jesus taught, of what the Essenes, what the Cathars, what the any of these ancient people who they've been stomped out by the archons, they've been stomped out by the negative agendas, the propaganda machines, and the Roman Church, or whoever you want to see as the major of the time, they have worked together to stomp out the real truths. And so there's two truths here. And so whether he's the real guy or not, we need to get down to this. And when we're looking at this book that supposedly is, the New Testament, and I'm reading it, from my point of view and from my perspective, we do still have Jews alive today. And we need to understand, and we need to be questioning what's the differences. I wrote a whole blog called Strange Differences, and that is just the tip of a very iceberg of inklings of questions that I have about, we need to really understand what's this all about here. Because in the truth of reality, in the truth of majority, in organic nature, God's source doesn't play favorites. There isn't a golden chosen few. Don't believe it. Don't see it, and I won't have it. And I won't play victim to it, and I won't accept it as a truth. And I don't care if it takes eternity of me to deny that to the very last of anything. I will sit there and sit for unconditional fairness and unconditional love, because I know it's true. I will not choose between my sons. I will not say either one of them is better than the other and has more right to life than the other. No, I can't. And so, yeah, I feel like we need to really get on common ground here with discussing about whether somebody's better than the other or not, and whether God could really have shown his light upon others, have more of him in other than every bit of is a fractal source, is equality. Anyways, because the verbiage here, how deep does the verbiage really go? Because we have a lot of this, Gentiles. We have a lot of the verbiage between us, ours, people like us, Jews, Gentiles, uses the word heathens, men, right? What are these classifications? I would like to know, just for personal levels. And are we still? Is there a hierarchy to the hue of man here? I'm a part of that hierarchy said to be a hue of man, and I would like to know where I stand in honesty. And if I'm looking to this Jesus as a master, as a teacher, as I'm looking to ascend to my highest truth, to my best quality, to find my highest clarity, my best resonance and true path back to source and God in heaven, to ascend to my highest quality I can, I want to do that in all honesty. I want to get there the best as I can. I don't want to set myself up for failure. I don't want to be attaining into aspirations that aren't meant for me, that aren't right to me, right? So we should be wanting to know if we should be aligning to these teachings. Is he speaking to others who are part of this blood cult that have nothing to do with us, and that we are never born into it and aren't a heritage of it? So why are we even listening and looking for true bits in it? It's confusing to me. And, Jesus uses these terms, Gentiles and heathens, quite often in his teachings. And also, what is the real meaning of Israel? We've talked about that. And is it a blood right, birthright? Seems to be a line there. It's in the traditions of these days, right? If we look at the Jews of these days and we look at what we're talking about here, but it could be, and what I like to see it as, is a metaphorical, metaphysical, intellectual, spiritual, some kind of borderline, misconstrued, or possibly, or just, maybe it's convenience or it's on purpose, who knows. But I think it's important that there's a conversation made to be had about that. And interesting enough, if you start to think that perhaps there's some real truth in a lot of that in the language, it's interesting. And I'm just going to leave this as an ending here. I'll get into this at a later date. But is there a difference between his people, as to those people in that time, and our people? And perhaps what those people needed to go through, cleanse, to clear, to ascend, to break out of the infestation, parasitical frequency, evilness, all of this stuff that they're really a part of in there at those times, to break out of those, you know. And he's speaking to his people who have been the biggest impactors, the biggest abusers, the biggest, they have the most cancerous infections within them of their peoples, you know, that they really needed. So the deepest purgings, because the evilness, the Satan, had infested and deeply rooted into their peoples, into as more than others, deeper or longer, or from somewhere else, or from something else, who knows? And that he was saying to them that he has come from a higher state of evolution of them to say that there is a way out. And it's interesting to think that it's kind of an inverted truth to say that, oh, well, if those chosen people will be judged first by God because they're their favorite and they're the most special, best, and have done God's bidding to his liking, the closest, and they're the A students in this kind of classroom. And I think that's a huge inversion and a misconception, in fact, you know, and if we look at actually what true source would be, and it would be more of a looking to seek and serve the whole of humanity as an average, the first to be judged would probably be the worst, or those who have performed the weakest or poorest, or those closest to the FDC barrier of the students, to grade on a nice curve, to actually create a curve, right? Because a kind teacher, gentle observer, someone who wants all students to pass and to do well, creates a curve to judge upon. And that curve doesn't benefit the smartest, best students. Really doesn't even benefit the mediocre. I mean the median, middle, average, you know, striving to do better students. It helps the mediocre, lazy students. It helps the defiant, disabled students. The rebellious ones. The ones who don't think they need the teachings. And if we look at the infiltration and the inversions, and perhaps what that Old Testament and what the old hierarchy and the old structures are trying to force upon us, and what they're built upon, is very archonic. And perhaps if we remember that the whole structure is set and built by the archonic structure, and that it's been placed here for many centuries, makes quite sense as to what's happened here, and where those things were built upon, and who's running the show, and why. And so I'm going to be getting into more of that later. I said I want to keep this to half an hour. Now I'm at 45 minutes, but I'm still under an hour, so I'm meeting my goals. These are just my immediate inklings of to where I'm standing, who I am reading these books, who I am hearing these wonderful teachings, hoping to run this study alongside my Jesus Journal podcast, but we'll see. If those are up, I'll put a link into those as well. People are interested in listening to those. That's more a bit of my direct link and teachings, whispers that I'm receiving from God Source, my higher self, from that beautiful archetype of that great master. Perhaps that was Jesus even, dare I say. So if you're interested in those, I'll share those as soon as they're up. Thank you for listening and taking time to listen here with an open ear and open heart. I'd love to hear your opinions. Kind words, critiques, and comments are always welcome. So feel free to send them to my email, third.i.navigation@protonmail.com. You can find the links in the descriptions, of course, or put a reply on my blog, or send me contact over on my blog at my website, AmarieSpeaks.com. Have a beautiful day or evening wherever you are in the world, and I will catch you next time.